Hi, and welcome back to the Coach's Corner, where we take a principle from one of the 7 core healthy and happy habits principles and discuss them through a core lens. And this month we are focusing on core. Yeah, there you go. And so Charlotte and I are kicking. I don't know when you're watching this, but it's December 1st today, so we're kicking the month off with a core bang. So Charlotte and I were talking. Charlotte's our coach. We were discussing some fun our dynamics and thought we might talk about that for a little bit. So you want to
Yeah,
kick us off?
yeah, sure. Um, I was just kind of laughing to myself last night because my daughter is also part R, and she's an RO, and but the R tends to come out more strongly, especially when she's agitated. So as a parent, you get into these situations with your kids where you want certain things to happen and they're not on board, and then as a teenager, you get that kind of dynamic going as well. So you get some natural resistance and some hormones that are kind of like still figuring out how to
Right.
manage and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so because we're both R's, our conversations can be a little aggressive at times, and it doesn't necessarily bother us. I mean, it can be like we do try to be careful with each other's feelings and we try to be thoughtful and sensitive. And I've tried to do a good job of teaching emotion regulation and just politeness, general, like, let's not be rude.
Right. Good manners.
Right, good manners. But our conversations sometimes can sound very different than they might sound between my husband and her because he's a CE, and she's an RO, and I'm an RE. When Bella and I get going, it can escalate really quickly, and we can get loud, and we can kind of interrupt and talk over each other. And sometimes that leads to like real agitation, and sometimes it's like, okay, we can just take that in stride. But if that were to happen with my husband, it would not go over well.
Right.
Like there wouldn't be much ability to regulate and resolve things quickly, if that makes any sense. But with my daughter and I, we often will get into conversations and it will go for a while. But we can always, I can't think of a time when we haven't brought it back around to a really positive space again. The resolution that we both are pushing for is we're able to accomplish it because we both have that as a goal in mind, and we both have that sort of drive to like, I don't want to end this in a bad way. I don't want to walk away from this yet because it's not in a good space. And sometimes, her O will just get like tuckered out. Like, I'm just, okay, fine, whatever. No, I'll just
Yeah.
listen, you know, which is sort of helpful. Um, Actually quite helpful. Anyway, eventually, like, we can both come to a good resolution and it's positive, and we end up hugging at the end and like, thank you for that. And I love you. And, I think you're a great person and this kind of thing. Whereas like you don't necessarily see that with other temperaments when they become escalated that way.
Totally. No, you're highlighting something that is such a benefit of being in a relationship with an R and of being an R. Um, because that drive for resolution also holds you together, right?
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
C's, E's, and to a lesser degree O's in those moments will get their feelings hurt and stay dysregulated or disconnected from the other person much longer than ours will, because ours can have a pretty intense interaction and still, you said it really well, be drawn toward resolving that interaction because you don't want to leave it unresolved, and that gets you back in a good place much more quickly than other temperaments. And we don't talk enough about that. I don't think that is a real predictable aspect of Arnis and a great strength of Arnis. You also highlighted another thing, which is the R's tendency to meet resistance with equal or greater resistance. And so when you come at an R, or there's a perceived coming atness, or
Hmm.
how do you say that?
Hmm.
The R brain naturally meets that resistance with equal or greater resistance.
Yeah, the hackles go up and you're kind of like, hey, look, I'm gonna level up with
Are
you.
we doing this?
And she's totally willing to level up, She's
I
like,
guess we're doing
okay.
this. Right. No, and so when you get 2 R's, you can really get that tension. My wife is a primary R, and so is her dad, and they'll have pretty heated discussions about politics or different things, and they're having a great time, actually. This is a little bit different than what you were talking about, but they'll both really be enjoying like the intensity of the interaction.
The debate.
Yeah, and sometimes other people around them will be like, "Hey, will you guys stop fighting, please?" It's happened several times when I've been in the room, and I've either said it myself or somebody else has said it, and they'll both look at the person and they're like, "We're not fighting." Yeah, so for them, they're like, "We're not even upset. They're really enjoying the intensity of the interaction." And for other people, especially for C's and O's in that example, their intensity can
You
feel
want to step
really
back.
right, can feel really
Yeah.
scary. When for the R, it's just like, no, they're just passionate, just having a good old time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had to learn to temper that in myself so that I don't agitate people around me or distress them. Like they will get, like I have one child in particular that tends to get very like anxious about it, and so we just have to be real careful about if we just go to another room,
Yeah,
or encourage him to go to another room and like, just so that it's not upsetting for anyone else.
totally. And I think that's such a good one of the reasons why it's so important to understand temperament, because neither is broken, right?
Right.
It's not like the way that our brains work and the intensity that you function at is broken, nor is it broken that your C husband is uncomfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you understand somebody's temperament, then you can much more accurately interpret why they're doing the things that they're doing and where they're coming from. And I think that's such a good benefit.
Sometime maybe it was just that talking about my husband, that sometimes he'll come to her defense, and so it's almost better if he's not around, because it's easier for my daughter and I to resolve things together and come to a positive resolution without triangulation in the relationship that then can throw things sideways, and we can't quite get to what we need to address without then having to address also his needs and his issues
Yeah,
and his feelings. So it's sometimes best to make sure that you're keeping it between the two people that it's really between. And
super important in a conflict.
yeah, and that goes for like all the temperaments. Really, you just as if you're dealing with conflict with a person, you don't really want to be like spreading it out to lots of parties, and
It's
keep it private, keep it personal.
it's hard enough to resolve conflict well. And
Hmm.
there's so many things that you're trying to manage and regulate and do it in a healthy way and throw good passes and catch passes and
Hmm.
brainstorm and all those kinds of things, that when you add another person in there, it just complicates things exponentially. And so that's
Yeah.
also a really good point. Uh,
Especially if you're working on attachment and you're trying to improve
yes.
attachment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really good point. The other point that I was going to mention too is when you understand somebody's temperament, actually just happens naturally. A lot of times in families we have different expectations for different people based on their temperaments. And I was sharing that in my family, I'm an O, and so I don't get upset very much. I don't like conflict. I don't like negative emotion. And the reality is that, most of the time it's just not worth it to me. And so when I do get upset, it's like a big deal. Like my kids act like I'm like, losing and if my wife, who's the R, is, popping off or intense or whatever, it's not a big deal. They interpret it very differently when she does it. In fact, we were on vacation and our oldest daughter said to me just yesterday, she's like, "Dad, it's different when you do it." She said it. It does not mean the same thing when you get mad as it does when mom gets mad. And she was kind of saying, so it's not really fair for you to expect it to mean the same thing, because it doesn't mean, and that's true. Temperament does really influence what something means. And when you don't understand where we tend to think that people's brains work more or less the way ours do. And so when you don't understand why somebody's doing the things that they're doing, we misinterpret what it does mean and what it doesn't mean.
Yeah.
And so understanding that's super important as well.
Yeah. If you know your person who's an R is agitated, you can kind of take it with a grain of salt and recognize they're going to come back down. They're just elevated for the moment. And it probably doesn't mean XYZ that it would mean for some other person in the family or in a relationship that might have a lower threshold.
Totally. And so if I do it, it does mean something different. Another, finding in the research that ties into this, which is kind of important. Research shows that about 80% of affairs that men have are categorized as opportunistic affairs, meaning that, they're on a business trip or, something happens. It's not a planned out thing. Where most of the affairs that women have are more relationship based. And it's kind of interesting because the data shows that men typically have an easier time getting over an affair that their wife has, and wives typically have a harder time getting over affairs that their husbands have, because we tend to think that they're doing it for the reasons that we do it. So women look at an affair that their husband has had and they think, well, he's having a relationship, and they think that it means what it would mean if they were
deeper.
And the man's like, well, maybe it was just, an opportunity or whatever. And it doesn't mean when in reality, the men should probably be more worried than the women are. And I'm not downplaying affairs or anything. Huge violations of trust. One of the hardest things for a relationship to overcome. I'm just trying to show that likeness that we tend to interpret things to mean what they would mean if we were doing it. And temperament is one of those things where if your daughter's getting upset and blowing her top, and she's an R and you're an R, you don't interpret that nearly the same as if maybe one of your C husband or child did that.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that can help you more accurately interpret where somebody's coming from.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. Thank you. Good discussion.
Yeah.
Good thoughts.
Always good.
Yeah. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Talk to you later.
Bye.